Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire.
Happy Tuesday and welcome back to the Dynasty Heat Seekers live stream and fantasy football show. It's an awesome night. We are excited, not only because we have an amazing guest, but we have a lot of amazing things going on in the community. First and foremost, I want to thank each and every one of you that made August such a successful month for the Roto Heat team. We had over 30,000 unique views on the website and over 20,000 views here on YouTube, and we couldn't do it without you guys, so we appreciate it. We love each and every one of you. With that being said, we got a lot going on tonight, and not only that, we have an amazing guest. One of my favorite follows on Twitter, Mr. Eric Moody. How are you tonight, my friend, and thank you so much for joining us.
Well, no, you're welcome. I would say, first of all, thank you for the invite. You know, it's always good to chat about fantasy football, but I'm doing great. You know, we're getting close. I'll say we're getting close. So next week we'll be kind of preparing, you know, getting ready for week one, and so I'm excited about that. Hey, the preseason's been a whirlwind. You know, unfortunately, we've had you know, some injuries that have taken place. I know we'll talk about some of that for tonight, but no, things are going really well. I would say if I were doing any better, I'd be a twin.
Nice.
I love it. I love it. And you guys can follow Eric over on Twitter at Eric and Moody. He's also got a lot of great content that he pumps out. So make sure you guys show some love to him and the Pro Football Network folks. Mr. Sullivan, how are you tonight, my friend? What's going on in the Great White North?
Hey, it's good, man. I'm happy to be here. Very excited to get Eric on. Been looking forward to this one for a while. It's been circled on the calendar. We're 9 days out from the start of the season. It's crazy how, you know, it feels like it's such a long wait, but when you're in this business and you're doing it 365 days of the year, it's funny how, I don't know how, but the season kind of crept up on me. So I'm pumped. I'm excited. Happy to hear those numbers that you shared at the top. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to having a nice, fun chat with you fine gentlemen for the next hour.
It will be fun because there's a whole lot to chat about. Obviously, if for those of you that just woke up, it has been roster cut down day. There have been a lot of cuts. There have been a lot of moving parts. I definitely want to warn you not to overreact to the cut downs in the moving parts. If you loved a rookie that got cut, don't be alarmed. They might get stuck on the practice squad. Maybe they get called up later in the season. Don't freak out. With that being said, Mr. Sullivan, what's in the news and notes? What are we talking about tonight?
Well, we might as well start off with the news that I woke up to pretty much, and that was that the New England Patriots have decided to release quarterback Cam Newton and give the keys to the car to rookie Mac Jones. So I'm just kind of wondering, what does this offense look like now? So, Eric, what do you think the difference will be having Mac Jones under center versus Cam Newton?
Well, I would say, first of all, you know, just having Jones, you know, as the starter, you know, it's positive, especially for all the skill position players, in particular, the wide receivers, you know, and tight ends, so I'll get to in a minute. But I'll say, first of all, hey, really great for Damian Harris. You look at the 10 games he played last year, like he averaged nearly 14 rushing attempts and 69 rushing yards per game, you know, solid work. I would say one big benefit, you know, he doesn't have to worry about Newton like siphoning away like rushing attempts, you know, especially like those goal line attempts like near the goal line. So I think that's a big thing. But when we look at the passing game, a big boost for Jacoby Myers, Nelson Aguilar. One thing I noticed during the preseason, you know, Myers had really great chemistry with Jones. So I'm excited to see, you know, the connection that they have and how that carries over into the regular season. I would say as far as with the tight ends, huge opportunity for them. If you look at it over the last two seasons, like the Patriots have accumulated like the fewest, you know, targets, receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns like from tight ends in the NFL. So I think Jones instead of Newton is obviously going to change that. He had success, you know, at Bama throwing the football. We all know his collegiate body of work. You know, you just look at last season alone just to bring all that together. I'm like, Jones was Alabama's all-time single-season passing leader, you know, with around 4,500 yards. So, hey, the ceiling for all these players is elevated. You know, I'm excited to see what happens.
Mr. Sullivan, what do you think? Oh, I will go next.
You can go next, or I can go next, whatever.
Look at that. We're trying to be nice to each other. All right, I'll go next. So my anticipation with this is that we see a lot of, I looked back and started digging through kind of like 2002 to 2010 New England Patriots information and seeing how that offense run, because I know now Brady versus then Brady was a little different. And I kind of expect this team to become more balanced in the sense that I could easily see Mac Jones start the year off a little slower with maybe not so many passing attempts per game, but really ramp it up midseason and as they push through to the end. I could easily see him get 550 to 600 pass attempts. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility for him. But I don't think that this offense looks the same in the sense of like, if I'm a James White owner, I'm not super excited because I don't know that he gets involved in the pass game as much because of the tight ends that Eric mentioned and, some of these receivers. The receivers, though, I'm really interested to see what happens, because they still have N'Keal Harry on the roster and some of these other guys. I don't know exactly how they fit. Jacoby Myers, we saw a little bit of a spark last year, and I know folks are excited about the potential with him. Outside of him, I'm just unsure, and I'm not confident in either of the other guys. And then we already know the tight ends have been banged up. I think Hunter Henry's got a shoulder issue right now currently. And, so it's like, okay, what does this thing look like? And I think they want to build a strong defense and let the running game dictate the passing game to start the year. And then I think it balances out as we move throughout the year, depending on how Mac Jones gets, if he's comfortable, because preseason football action is a lot different than Miami week 1 when Flores is throwing the kitchen sink at him and bringing, odd blitzes and all sorts of crazy pressures. But I'm excited for Mac Jones, though. I think, every rookie quarterback in this class in the first round should be playing. Justin Fields should be playing. All these other guys should be starting because they all are very talented. And I think it doesn't do them any good making them sit. Fields sitting behind Dalton doesn't do anything for him. So what about you, Sullivan? What do you think?
I pretty much am going to echo what you both have said and take a little bit from each of you. I think the run game gets the biggest lift here, in my opinion, because Cam Newton ran for 12 touchdowns last year and he threw for 12. So I definitely believe that Damian Harris gets a nice boost. And I'm very interested to see how the Patriots utilize Ramondre Stevenson. He's built for that goal line work, so I think that he could benefit and be a sneaky guy on your fantasy rosters as well. I like Jacoby Myers. I like this for Nelson Aguilar as well. I think he was almost a dead asset with Cam Newton at quarterback, with Mac Jones willing to take a couple of shots downfield here and there. I like it. And I like Jonnu Smith a lot because he's athletic and he can line up all over the field. I think Hunter Henry, when they're all healthy, will be the guy with his hand in the dirt more often than not, and Jonnu lining up all over the place. So the offense is going to be very interesting. And I agree with you, Brad. I think they're going to still be a run-heavy team, but I do believe that as they progress through the season, we'll see Mac Jones taking a little bit more control of that offense, for lack of a better term. But interesting. I think New England has the capabilities with their defense improving as well to give Buffalo a little bit of a run for their money in that division again.
Way to go, Sullivan, dropping the ball on your stats already. I'll tell you.
Oh, I wish that was the first time I was wrong. He only threw for 8 touchdowns. Holy crap. Okay, so
just put it out there. All right, go ahead.
Well, so Cam's free agent. He's gone. He's been released. It's not like he was bad in the preseason either. I thought he looked quite good, in fact. So my question to both of you, and Brad, I'll go to you first this time, is where does Cam end up?
I know I've seen a lot of folks say Houston looks like a good spot. If I'm Cam, I just kind of sit and wait and see what happens. I don't think he wants to go somewhere where he has to, potentially compete, because Tyrod Taylor is not a bad quarterback. I know he's had some bad luck at times, but he is more than capable of running that offense if Deshaun or whatever they are doing doesn't actually transpire. So if I'm Cam, I'm sitting and waiting and seeing what happens. If a team gets an injury, maybe the Colts with Carson Wentz, the injury stays, maybe he goes to a team like that. Like, I'm not in a hurry to sign with a roster and be on a team and fighting for a spot, because he wants to be the starter. He doesn't want to have to keep fighting for a spot. At least that's what I would anticipate, because when you listen to him, he's an alpha, and an alpha doesn't want to be hanging out holding the clipboard. But what do you think, Eric?
Yeah, you brought up a really good point about kind of that alpha mindset. I'll kind of tie that back to the team where I would recommend that he go to. I would say one team that came to mind like immediately was the Pittsburgh Steelers. You've got Ben Roethlisberger that's there. He's clearly going to be the guy for this year. This could be his swan song. But even if you're an alpha, I think if you take a step back and really look at your situation and just think, okay, what is going to be the best scenario for me to rebound? And I believe like Pittsburgh would be a really good spot. Take a step back, kind of learn, from Roethlisberger, kind of regroup, kind of take a year where you're holding the clipboard, and then come back looking to compete in the upcoming season, the next season. I think that would be the best scenario for Cam to do that. The thing that concerns me though, I don't know if he's going to be open to doing that. And that could be really like detrimental. So I think he's at the position where he's really close just to being like a backup quarterback from here on out. There's still some opportunities. It just comes down to, and this is something we can't really quantify for fantasy, it's just on kind of how he handles it, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
I might change my answer to Pittsburgh after that. I never even thought of the Steelers, and I think that that's a great point. My concern is I don't know if Cam wants to be a backup anywhere. And if he doesn't, I'm not sure he gets a job. I think two of the best spots for him, I don't think Houston makes any sense because they don't need to make that change. They're probably going to be the football team that they're going to be, whether it's Tyrod or it's Davis Mills. I don't think that makes much of a difference there. I think the Giants are a really good opportunity for him because I think Daniel Jones is hanging by a thread right now. And I also kind of like him going to Washington back with Ron Rivera. And, I don't think Fitzpatrick, as much as I like him and think he's going to have a good season, I don't know how long he's going to be there. So that might be an opportunity for Cam to, similar to Eric's point about Pittsburgh, is just kind of sit and wait. But Cam doesn't really have a backup quarterback's persona and mentality. You kind of want your backup quarterback to stand on the sidelines with an earpiece and a clipboard and not bring attention to himself. And I don't know if Cam Newton has that in his DNA. So I don't know. I think he might be done.
Well, and the thing that people don't think about, especially with a team like Washington, is Ryan Fitzpatrick's very up and down. He'll go through streaks where he's on fire and doing very well, but then he'll go through streaks where, a couple years back, we watched him throw, 5 interceptions at Pittsburgh and do all sorts of crazy stuff. So a team like Washington, if they want to make sure that they can win the NFC East again, bringing a guy like Cam in isn't a bad idea. I mean, I like both those ideas. I love it if he goes to Pittsburgh because he can help mentor a guy like Dwayne Haskins, who I think could be the future for them if he just gets some good leadership and some good coaching. I think he has the tools to be able to do it. And a guy like Cam could help him learn how to run and be able to make smart plays because, it's what Cam did best. So that's some very interesting. I hadn't thought about it. I kept hearing people say Houston and it didn't make any sense. Although I do want to point on a side note, I feel very bad for Coach Culley. Like, that guy deserves better. He's been such a good coach in the league, and he gets stuck with this team that's just in such disarray. And I don't know how long he survives as the head coach of this team. It's just such a mess of a team right now, and I feel so bad for him and for the fans in Houston. I have lots of friends down there that, they've dealt with everything from David Carr to this, and it's like, ooh, just rough. But yeah, I digress. Mr. Sullivan, what else is going on? Are we going to crush the dreams of our Baltimore friends?
Well, unfortunately, Saturday did. J.K. Dobbins was injured and looks like he's done for the season, tearing his ACL and a little bit more damage to that knee. So his season gets wrapped up before it even got to start. So I guess, what does this mean for Gus Williams? Who's that? What does this mean for Gus Edwards? What does it mean for Tyson Williams? And do we think the Ravens bring in another running back, Eric?
Yeah, I would say I don't see them bringing in another running back. I think they're very comfortable, with the trio that they have on the roster. Like, you look at Gus Edwards from a fantasy lens. For me, he's now firmly on the RB2 radar in all formats. Yeah. I don't care if it's half-point PPR standard. Go get the guy. I would say from a projections lens, I have him around 1,200 total yards and 8 touchdowns. I'm thinking a lot about this since the unfortunate Dobbins injury. But you look at running backs with 700 or more rushing yards in each of the last 3 seasons. Now, Gus Edwards is part of this group, but think about some of the company that he's keeping here. Aaron Jones, Ezekiel Elliott, Nick Chubb, Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry. And so he's got the potential to be really great in this offense. Now, I know everyone's maybe thinking it now, Lamar Jackson, the rushing attempts, goal line, all that stuff. I get that. But I would say one element of Jackson's game that he may improve on this year is really with leveraging his running backs. His receivers out of the backfield, because historically he hasn't done that quite a bit. But always think about a player from year to year, thinking about areas that they can improve in and how they can evolve. So I think this is an area for where Jackson, could use his running backs a little bit more. You brought up one name too that I've been really high on, like with Williams. I think he's going to find a role like on this team. I think Gus Edwards is going to be the alpha. He's going to be kind of the guy. But I can definitely see them getting Williams some more touches this year, and it could be at the expense of Justice Hill. I could really see that happening. But I think they're comfortable, going to battle, with this trio. But I think Gus Edwards is going to have a career season at this point.
I like it, Bradley.
Justice Hill is, I think, the X factor in this equation. Like, what do they do with him? He's been on the roster, and it seems like nobody is interested in really getting him much more than complimentary roles. Like anyone that I talk to, anyone I listen to, nobody seems to think he's got much more than he could do a little bit of receiving out of the backfield. But because of his size, which I think he's, like 5'10", right around 200 pounds. I mean, he's not tiny, but he's not massive either. We know that Baltimore likes their kind of bigger backs, 5'10" and up, but they got to be 220 and up kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I don't see how Justice Hill can't get involved in the conversation. Like, even if he's just a receiving back, which then it really muddies up the whole situation for everybody outside of Gus Edwards. Even when they had Dobbins and Mark Ingram and all these other running backs, Edwards was still getting you 700-ish yards on the ground and 2 to 5-ish touchdowns. I mean, so he was definitely relevant even before this. So Edwards is the true number one here, and probably, Eric, I think you're absolutely right. It's probably RB2 type value. And if you're a competing team, I would easily be confident sending, kind of a second round pick, a high second, maybe even a late first, in value wise to get him if you needed running back help. Maybe that guy somehow has Gus Edwards and Sony, and maybe you can get them both for this year so you can make a run. Like, I would be okay going after a package of guys that may not be great long term, but at least get you over the hump this year. Because I've had a few conversations with folks today that are asking questions like that, like, hey, I'm competing this year, but my running backs are weak because all these injuries. And, I wouldn't be afraid to do that, but I definitely am not looking at anybody outside of Gus Edwards from a long-term perspective, because the contract of Edwards, he's going to be in Baltimore a couple more years, and then Dobbins will be back. I mean, this injury is one that you can rehab and come back from. But Rob, what do you think?
I really like Gus Edwards first and foremost, and I liked Gus Edwards coming into this year prior to the J.K. Dobbins injury. If you look at last season in Baltimore, when the Ravens started to make Mark Ingram a healthy scratch starting in Week 7, Gus Edwards was the RB25 for the remainder of the season. There's a role for two running backs there, and if Lamar can target his running backs a little bit more, then maybe Justice Hill will get a little bit of a look out there. From what I've read about Justice Hill, is he's not the greatest in pass protection, so that really doesn't get you on the field a lot when you're an undersized back, and you're probably best suited to catch passes versus to carry the football. So I don't know if he's going to be much of an equation. Williams intrigues me. I think he can sort of take kind of a poor man's Gus Edwards role in this offense. I do think he's going to be involved. Eric, your point earlier about Lamar Jackson's rushing around the goal line, he only had 3 carries inside the 5 last year. So he hands the ball off down there. So I think that there's definitely a role for both of these guys. I'm excited to see how it plays out. I'm a big Gus Edwards guy. I just moved him to RB19 in my redraft rankings. So I'm in that RB2 range with him as well.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So one more just about the rookie quarterbacks, because I'm in love with all of them. So now what do we have? We have 3 that are going to start the season: Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, and Mac Jones. My question to both of you is, how long before the other 2 are starting quarterbacks for their teams as well? Brad?
I mean, Justin Fields, I would anticipate being on the field probably within the first 6 to 8 weeks. Everybody talks about that kind of really rough first part of the season for the Bears. I was actually kind of surprised, though, that they didn't name him the starter out of the preseason, because Andy Dalton didn't wow me in the preseason at all. When you watched him, you saw Andy Dalton. But when you watched Justin Fields, he was electric. I mean, he was getting out of the pocket, running around, trying to extend the play, do some things that could potentially get him hurt, but also could potentially get big plays, So my guess is they want to keep him safe, but, with the jobs on the line for Nagy and company, I got to think they put him on the field sooner rather than later. My guess is probably somewhere from week 6-ish on is probably the earliest if they don't start him week 1. What do you think, Mr. Eric?
Yeah, I would say as far as Justin Fields, you brought up some really good points. Andy Dalton has not looked good during the preseason, while Justin Fields, on the other hand, has looked solid. He's shown us, or given us a glimpse of what he's capable of. And I'd go as far as to say that I would say week 1. Like, I'm comfortable with saying that. It's just, I know they've said that, hey, we're going to go with Andy Dalton. But I think they can easily come back in the week going up into the season opener, just saying that, hey, Fields has looked good during the preseason. He's looked good in practice. We're going to go with him because, to your point, their jobs are on the line. And so I think Fields gives the team the best chance to win, but also it gives the GM and the head coach the best chance to keep their job.
Mr. Sullivan.
Well, I think Fields should be under center to start week 1. I don't know if he will be, but I have a sneaky suspicion that if he doesn't start week 1, he's going to finish it. I think that game is pretty ugly for the Bears. And it's an easy segue to Justin Fields if Andy Dalton struggles in that game. If Dalton makes it through week 1, I'm wondering if he gets week 2 because they play the Bengals. I don't know if that matters, if they want to give Andy Dalton that opportunity again. So the latest I see Fields getting on the field is week 4 against the Lions. I think that no offense, Brad, is a good setup for him to get into. But I think he should be out there right away. And Trey Lance apparently has a finger injury that's going to keep him out about a week. Mm-hmm. Kyle Shanahan's talking about using both of them, which is terrible for us fantasy people. It possibly takes away the starting equation for either one of them. I have a few guillotine leagues where I just grabbed Lance early and Garoppolo late and figured I would just roll with the San Francisco quarterbacks all year. Now I don't know if he's going to muddy that up, but I think Trey Lance as well can be the starting quarterback in San Francisco this year. I just think it's harder for him because it's the way it's set up for Garoppolo and the Niners is they have a decent schedule and they've proven they can win with Jimmy. So they probably still win with Garoppolo under center. A little harder to make quarterback change when you're, I think they have a week 6 bye. If they're 4-2 or 5-1 going into that bye, I don't think they're making a change anytime soon. So I think Lance might have to wait a little bit.
Yeah,
it's such a tough situation because when everybody in San Francisco is healthy, Garoppolo's fine. He's not amazing, but he ran they got to a Super Bowl just fine, and he wasn't amazing. So in my mind, it's like, why do they have to start Trey Lance early? Why? Especially because of all the rookie quarterbacks, he's probably the most raw. Why not give him time to get acclimated? Your defense is amazing in so many ways. You've got a good rushing attack. You've got good receivers. You've got a quarterback that can manage the game just fine and do what he needs to do. Like, why rush the kid in? And especially in the West, that's a tough division. He's going to be getting chased after by a lot of really good defenders. So why rush it? If they play him this year, I would be surprised. Like, I expected Garoppolo to be the guy because they didn't have a trade partner up until, I expected if they didn't trade Garoppolo, then Lance sits for a while. And if they trade Garoppolo, then they're just going to run with Lance. So that was kind of my gut, at least at that point. And it still kind of is. Cool.
That's all I got, Brad. It's all yours, man.
All right. So this really strange 3-game preseason is in the books. It definitely felt weird because everybody was trying to guess when that game 3 of the equation came into the play, where teams tried to make it look like it was the regular season and they had their starters play a half, and nobody really did that. Throughout the preseason, we saw a lot of teams sit starters. We saw a lot of teams see guys get hurt and then decide to not play anybody else because they didn't want anyone else to get hurt.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to really peel away the different layers of this onion and figure out what is the takeaway from the preseason. But Eric, I want to start with you, and I want to kind of just get, kind of your broad picture. Like, what did you think you learned from the preseason that maybe you didn't know, or good or bad? So you saw something in the preseason that you were excited about, or you saw things in the preseason that you weren't excited about. And let's just see where the conversation goes.
Yeah, it's because you brought up a good point about with the preseason feeling different because of the the number of games, and then some teams like, you know what, Aaron Rodgers, all these other high profile players, you're going to sit right here on the bench. But I would say one name that really came to mind that I'll kind of kick us off with was Trevor Lawrence. Just kind of watching how he started the preseason, how he made some adjustments, and how he ended it. I felt like his his performance like this past week was really like near perfect. Like it was solid. I think it was a really nice tune up for him going into his rookie season. I think this was the game where everything really came together for we're like, okay, hey, this is why this guy has been touted like all off season leading into the draft as like the number one guy. I know against the Cowboys he completed 11 of 12 passes for 139 yards, 2 touchdowns, had a passer rating of 154.5. So it was solid. And so I was excited about that because you're looking at his ADP in fantasy for where I think he's a solid, QB2. And it's in the realm of possibility that he does finish as like a low-end QB1. You just look at the Urban Meyer scheme. We're assuming we don't know what it's really going to look like until the regular season. But it seems to be, as far as what I can see, very quarterback-friendly. And so I'm very comfortable if you're in a Superflex league, 2-quarterback league, landing Lawrence as like your QB2. I'd even be as comfortable if you're in like a 10-team or a 12-team league. You really want to wait, really leverage that late-round quarterback mentality. I'm even comfortable in the league like that, taking him as my QB1 if you really want to wait. So I would say that's one kind of takeaway I had from the preseason. I've got a few others too, which I can touch on, but want to pass the baton back to you two gentlemen.
Mr. Sullivan, I know you love these rookie quarterbacks, so Mr. Trevor Lawrence, feel free to tell us.
I really enjoyed watching that game and just seeing him sort of take the pieces of the puzzle and put them all together. I was never really worried about Trevor Lawrence, but it was a little of an uneasy feeling just to see how he was sort of struggling a little early on. I'm still concerned about that offensive line in Jacksonville. I think he's going to have to get the ball out in a hurry. But the other takeaway from that game in the preseason as well is Laviska Shenault looks amazing, and I think he has the ability to just tear the lid off this season. It's interesting. I think perhaps a lot of teams learnt from last season, and they didn't have a preseason. So I think a lot of the organizations, to Eric's point earlier, just took their starters and their stars and said, "Here's your jersey. I'm keeping your helmet and your shoulder pads. Enjoy the game." And that's kind of what we saw. So I would have liked to have seen some more. I would have liked week 3 to be a sort of a quote unquote traditional dress rehearsal week 3, but it seems like everybody just sort of treated it like week 4. So I don't know, Brad, what are you kind of taking away from this odd preseason?
Well, and if anybody could have come into Jacksonville and really performed, it was going to be Trevor Lawrence, because when you look at his time in Clemson, it's not like they had any superstars on the offensive line. He's been playing with nobody in front of him for a while now. So it's what we saw in college, he's prepped for. And yeah, I really expected some of these offensive linemen to take a leap because so many of them are higher valued players, guys they took in the 2nd round, 3rd round. It's like, okay, when are these guys going to step up and really start to become these all-pro type linemen? And they just haven't yet. So Trevor Lawrence, I think, will be okay as long as he protects himself when he gets out of the pocket. I mean, because that's where it's really going to hurt him. He's going to be facing really high-level linebackers every week in this league. It's not like in the ACC, he's sometimes facing, guys that don't take good angles and get sloppy. These guys are going to know how to hit him and put the, lay the wood on him. So, he's got to be careful in that sense of the term. But I think he will be perfectly fine. The tough thing is he's just in a tough division. The Titans, we know, don't have the strongest defense, but have a really good offense. The Colts have a strong defense and a potentially strong offense. Obviously Houston's Houston right now, but so they're not in the easiest division. So this year may look rough for him. Hopefully, he protects himself and gives you some good high-end QB2 value, which I think he could, because this team should be throwing the ball early and often. As much as I like James Robinson, it seemed like Jacksonville didn't as much. So I feel like they're going to want to lean on Trevor and not so much on the run game. So it could be a very pass-happy offense this season while they're waiting for a guy like Etienne to come back from injury. We'll see. It'll be interesting to watch. He's definitely a fun player to watch. I'm rooting for him because I think he's got all the tools to be very successful. I just hope that people haven't put too much on him. We don't need to keep hearing about how he's the second coming of Peyton or any of these other great quarterbacks. Let him be Trevor. Let him go out, have fun, do what he does, be chill, get the ball moved around. Maybe make my DJ Shark shares a little bit better because I may be the only DJ Shark fan left in the world. I do love Laviska as well. Oh, see, look, I'm not alone.
Oh, jeez. I think Trevor.
You got to go for the cheap volume. I'm like, everyone's just like Laviska, Chenault, like, going crazy. Oh, I'm enamored by him. He's going to be great. But, DJ Shark is going to get some targets too. So, no, I echo the comment.
Well, and I wondered with how much Urban kept kind of pushing him, as you listened all offseason, we need him bigger. We need him more physical. It almost felt like they were telling him, listen, this is what we want. We see big things for you, but we need you to be this guy. So, I bought a few shares where I could if it was inexpensive enough.
Exactly.
And we'll see what happens. I definitely wasn't buying Laviska because as soon as Urban got there and Trevor Lawrence got there, his price went crazy. Like he hasn't produced yet.
The best value in that offense is still Marvin Jones, though. I think he's got a big role. But I will say this about DJ Shark, and I'm the resident hater of DJ Shark here at Roto Heat, but Colin Johnson being released today, I think, helps DJ Shark. So we'll see what happens there.
I do love Rick's comment about the interception record. That is pretty funny.
If he can start and end his career like Peyton Manning, he'll be fine.
I'm sure he'll be okay with all those interceptions. Yeah, for sure.
Totally.
All right, Eric. So who is the next guy that you had on your mind this preseason that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I'll tell you. It kind of pains me to name this individual, but Ja'Marr Chase. It's been rough. It's been dreadful. With all the drops that he's had, even with Joe Burrow in there. His buddy from LSU. They went on that incredible run together, but he still struggled when he was catching balls or trying to catch balls, I should say, from him. But I'll look at it this way. It's always two sides of the coin. I guess the perception is that, oh man, Ja'Marr Chase may not live up to the hype, that we expected. Forget that guy. But I think, as Sun Tzu would say, there's always opportunity like in chaos, and so it could be an opportunity for those that do have drafts, coming up for this week, leading up to the season, to take advantage of that dip because his ADP, like I just remember, it was relatively low. 8th, 9th, 10th round, it slowly started to go up, so we may be able to see the dip, and I think now is a really good opportunity to buy, whether you're doing redraft or maybe even dynasty too. Some may just be like, you know what, I don't like what I've seen. You always have those managers in your league for where they kind of make knee-jerk, reactions and decisions. So again, it could be something else there to leverage. But to bring all that together, I would say, me personally, I'm not worried about Chase. It was a rough preseason, but it's preseason. We're going into the regular season now. I think he'll be able to, really spread his wings, and I would say to showcase what we expected him to showcase, this summer during the preseason. So I'm not really worried. I'd go out there and acquire him where you can, but I still have him projected to lead the Bengals in targets, receiving yards, all those stats that we look at. He's the guy.
Well, and you got to remember the thing that'll be interesting to see looking a few years back, for a few years from now, is how did taking a year off affect a lot of these young guys? Because, we saw the same types of things with My Lions and Penei Sewell. He got beat a few times and looked rough, but, the guy's had a year and change off and really not done any football stuff. Getting ready for football is not the same of some guy trying to run you over playing football. So,
100%.
Exactly.
So I'm giving all these guys that took 2020 off a mulligan just because, it's going to take time for them to get up to speed. And we saw Ja'Marr Chase as an elite talent coming out. What changed now? Well, he had a year off. Give him time to get back into the swing of things. What is it? Rome wasn't built in a day. All right. So let him get back into football shape. And you're not alone. It looks like Rick wants to buy Chase everywhere so bad. So if anybody's selling, go find Rick. He's buying. And so am I. I would buy him as well. But the few places that I have seen people offer Chase, it's still been a fairly high price point, at least in Dynasty. In redraft, I think the dip is going to be great for you because if you pick him up as your, say wide receiver 3, he should give you wide receiver 2 value fairly easily, and then you've got a better return on your investment. But Mr. Sullivan, what do you think?
Yeah, I really like Ja'Marr Chase, and I think he's going to be just fine. I think we have been overreacting to what's going on. We had Jordan Vanek on this show 2 or 3 months ago, And he brought up a really interesting point that I never thought about. And he talked about the difference in the ball from college to the NFL and how some receivers were, I think it was talking about Jerry Jeudy's struggles with the ball and just the difference in the football. So I think that plays a part. I think absolutely having a year off, played like 20 months without playing football. I don't care if you're getting a jugs machine ripping the ball at you all day long. To Brad's point, when the lights are on and it's game day, it's a totally different scenario. I think he's going to be fine. And I'm not 100% sure he leads them in targets and receptions because I think they're going to bring him along a little bit slower than they originally planned. They have the luxury of still having T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd in that offense. They still have Joe Mixon. And by all accounts, the Bengals like Auden Tate as well. So perhaps Auden Tate takes a little bit away from Chase early in the season snap-wise, takes some pressure off of him. Joe Burrow knows him better than anybody. He's going to be fine. Just don't look for him to be blowing the doors off in the first couple of weeks. But to Eric's point, buy the dip if you're drafting this weekend or this week coming up and his ADP is slowly starting to fall back down again, buy that. And if somebody's selling him in Dynasty, buy that too.
Absolutely. So what we're saying is buy. I mean, that's,
bye.
Yeah. So, and you know, and he's, I always look for the elite talents, you know, and he's an elite talent. I mean, you go after those guys and you hope for the best. If it bites you, well, we all make mistakes in fantasy. It's the way it works.
Hey, we've all seen top level wide receivers not pan out, but we've seen top level quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends. We've seen them all not pan out. So nothing's guaranteed in this world, but you know, I would rather hitch my wagon to one of the top rated wide receiver prospects in the last 20 years than not. So I think it's just, maybe it requires a little bit more patience, but I still believe this is an elite talent in the years to come.
There you go. All right, Eric, who was next? You had a third, you said, right?
Yeah, I did. I know one running back, you know, I was thinking about was Javonte Williams. I know he had a lot of hype kind of going into the draft process, and once he landed with Denver, you know, the hype has continued to build. But I really like what I've seen from Williams. He's really showcased everything that we loved about him. You know, his ability to be a runner, you know, in between the tackles, his ability to, you know, create yards after contact, you know, his receiving ability. So all those things that we saw and were excited about, we saw those take place like on an NFL field. I just really like Williams for a couple of reasons. He's got an eerily similar skill set to Melvin Gordon. He got Pat Shurmur that's there. What I like is that he can have either one of those guys in the game and just really have them go in and out, you know, really interchangeably for where it's not going to tip the defense on, okay, they've got Williams in, here's what could happen. Oh, they got Gordon in, here's what could happen. So here's the type of scenario I envision. You know, you've got Melvin Gordon, who's obviously in a contract year, and he wants to continue to get paid, but, you know, he's essentially watching Denver, you know, back in the draft is like, oh, man, they are drafting my successor. That's like a younger version of me. And so I think what can end up happening is that really as the season progresses, Williams, depending on how he performs, can earn even more of an opportunity share. And he's really in a good position to be like a league winner as we get closer to the end of the season. You know, we all look back fondly on David Montgomery last year, you know, from week 12 to week 17, where he went like bonkers. I think he averaged close to like 27 PPR fantasy points a game, you know, 6 consecutive RB1 finishes. And that's the kind of cap to the season that I could see Javonte Williams having. You know, they've got Teddy that's there. He's going to deliver the ball. They want to lean on the running game. I think their offensive line will be even better this year just with the continuity that they have. Plus, they got one of the best offensive line coaches in the game in Mike Munchak, you know, criminally underrated. So I think that running game and the things that they want to do really come together like for this year. And so, again, I've been aggressively targeting Javonte Williams in like all of my drafts. And so he's a guy I really like, and I think he can have that kind of season.
I like both of those UNC backs. I think him and Michael Carter both have very good opportunities in the situations they're in, even with what's ahead of them. You know, we know that obviously Melvin Gordon, and then we've got Tevin Coleman and Michael P. Ryan and some of the other pieces in New York. Like both of these running backs not only split time at UNC and did a lot of different things running between the tackles, outside catches, all that good stuff. I mean, they're both just very dynamic, and it's exciting to see them because they both showed us in the preseason who they were. What we saw in college is what we're seeing in the NFL.
Exactly.
And for fantasy, that's a good thing. I mean, I remember mentioning, when rookie drafts were happening for Dynasty, I was getting Michael Carter in the second round. And I'm like, how are you guys letting this guy slide? Where Javonte Williams was shooting up, and now they're both evening out a little bit more, but they're both such good plays. Like if you can afford to get one of them, I would definitely take a shot at either of them. I mean, Javonte, I expect him to easily be, an RB1, probably more of a mid to back end RB1 next year on, at least for a couple seasons, because he's got the ability to such a dynamic pass catcher out of the backfield, or, watching him hit those holes and see where the play is going. Like he's done a really good job. I think his maturity level is really strong. And if they weren't paying Melvin so much, it wouldn't have surprised me if they moved on from him, but
Yeah, and you brought up a good point on Carter too, man. It's like you think about these guys with their, and everyone thinks about like workload and in college going to the NFL. I'm like these two guys. I think of them as like the Bash brothers from like the Mighty Ducks film franchise. These guys are like terrorizing like opposing defenses at UNC. Totally. But I think the beauty of it is that, since they were in a committee, they're coming into the NFL with having a very limited number of touches. So I think that's going to bode well for them, especially early in their career. So just wanted to add that in. So
no, you're absolutely right. Mr. Sullivan, how do you feel about Williams, and have you been able to get him?
I do have him in some spots. I think he was one of my top guys. He might have been my third RB in this year's draft class. I think it probably was 3. But I like him a lot. And I think the thing I like the most about him is he breaks tackles like nobody. I think he set some kind of college metric record last year for broken tackles. So he's super talented, and his balance and his strength with the ball in his hands is something to watch. I'm a little bit concerned with how he's going to be used early on. I do think that Melvin Gordon still has a role. That's one thing from this past week. Melvin Gordon looked pretty good. So I know he's a little banged up in camp, and I'm a little concerned with Teddy under center as well, because Teddy tends to keep the plays close to the line of scrimmage, and the opposing defenses know that. So I think he can stack the box a little bit more against Denver. But again, his ability to break tackles will bode well for him. His ability to catch the football will bode well. Eric brings up a great point of the defense is not going to know what's going on, regardless of what running back is on the field, because they both possess the same skill set. So I think that's really advantageous to him. I think he's absolutely a guy that I want going forward. Not only did Denver draft his successor, but they traded up to do it. So
good point.
They traded up into the early second round. That's usually an indication that you like a player and you want to use him. So I think he's going to, as the season goes on, I think I can see him taking over that backfield. To kind of look at last season. So we saw Jonathan Taylor start a little slow, and then once things started to pick up for him, he took off. J.K. Dobbins, similar thing. DeAndre Swift caught fire towards the latter part of the season. And I think that's what we can see out of Javonte Williams this year as well, as the season progresses. That 17th game as well is going to, I think, reduce the workload on all running backs across the season. So I think he's got a great shot at being an RB2 this season. Brad, your point for Michael Carter, I'm a little bit more concerned with Michael Carter, not in terms of skill set, but it doesn't seem to have the trust of his coaching staff. He came in really late this week behind Tevin Coleman, behind Johnson? And behind Michael Pirine. So I don't know if he's their fourth running back on their depth chart. I think eventually Michael Carter rises to the top of that, but I think it's going to maybe take him into next year to get there. So he's a great dynasty asset. Love him. You getting him in the second round, I think you're going to be thrilled with that going forward. But if you're looking at for productivity out of 2021, I think you might be a little disappointed there.
Mm-hmm. Potentially. And to what you were saying with Teddy and them stacking the box, when you look at his time in Carolina, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, very talented receivers. Yeah. He never had Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton and Noah Fant. Like they may try to stack the box, but they can move those guys around and really spread that defense apart in ways that he couldn't have done in Carolina. Mm-hmm. I think that's really going to help open up the running game, even if his passing, even if his air yards are, 7-8 yards per attempt, which I think he's sitting somewhere between 8.
That'd be his career high.
Yeah. I mean, so even if he's sitting there and he hits some of those things, they're going to be able to make defenses be a little more honest, because Jeudy is dynamic with the ball in his hands. Noah Fant is dynamic. Cortland Sutton, although he's coming back from injury, he looked solid last week with the few receptions that he got. So I'm all in, no matter who the quarterback is, whether it was Drew Lock, whether it was Teddy. I think this running game will
No,
still
it's a good
be
point.
really good.
And Denver's defense is excellent, right? So it makes sense to go with Bridgewater and kind of grind it out. And if you have to win 10-3 instead of 28-14, who cares? Just win the football game. And that's a really good point by Rick as well. And to add to that, the offensive line in Denver is vastly superior to what he had in Carolina last year. So good points, Brad. I agree with you on those wide receivers. That's a good point.
Yeah, so it'll be fun to watch. An extra game in the season will really be interesting to see how they manage the workload of the running backs, because it's a long season when you're just playing the regular season. So adding an extra game, and I think teams will try to be a little more cautious, I would anticipate, because we're already seeing some of these high-end running backs already going down. So teams aren't going to want to wear these guys out too soon. So it'll be fun to see what happens. But to Rick's point, I don't know that I've seen a lot out of Davis that got me excited this preseason. And I think Atlanta as a whole is just a team that is just in such a weird predicament. But Eric, what do you think about the Atlanta offense? How do you feel about a guy like Davis in a single year type scenario? What's happening there, and what's your gut tell you?
Yeah, I'm a little bit more optimistic on Mike Davis than others that are out there. I'm like, you've got new head coach, you got Arthur Smith that's coming in. Leaned very heavily on the running game, in Tennessee with, Derrick Henry, play action passing. And so you've got Mike Davis. I think what gives a lot of people pause is that, up to this point in his career, he's never been kind of quote unquote like a starter. He started strong last year when Christian McCaffrey went down, but then he ended up kind of slowly kind of fading. So he started strong, and then his fantasy points per game, production, it went down. I think it'll be different going into this year, because if you know just mentally going in that, hey, you're going to be quote unquote the guy, you're getting a lot of touches. Hey, they're signing me to be their starter. Like his preparation was a lot different. I know he broke the internet with pictures of his quads or calves. I can't remember which body part. A la like AJ Dillon and all the others. So he broke the internet with those pictures. But, physically he looked like, hey, I'm going to do my best job and do my best impersonation of Derrick Henry that I can, with these photos. And so what I see happening is that, Atlanta, they're going to try to slow down the pace. They may not run as many plays as they did with the previous regime. But I do see them leaning, very heavily, on Davis and the other running backs. And they're going to take their shots, obviously, with Calvin Ridley. They got Kyle Pitts that's there, Russell Gage. But I think they're going to lean on this running game. I could easily see, not saying Davis is going to get all these opportunities, but I think they could easily, at least based on my projections, I'm just kind of thinking about the spreadsheet in my head. Like, I think I've got them projected for around, 480 or 490 opportunities for all the running backs. And I think that Davis will end up getting a substantial amount of those opportunities. Like, I think he's going to push. He's obviously going to set a career high in touches opportunities for this year. But I can easily see him getting close to 300, anywhere from 280 to 300. And I think he's mentally ready for it. And I also think he's physically ready to take on that workload. So again, he's a solid RB2 that nobody wants to draft. But I think you should change your mindset there. Very comfortable landing him as my running back, too. He's going to give you some RB1 weeks when you look at Atlanta's competition and their schedule and matchups.
Well, and especially the division they're in is not the strongest against the run. I mean, outside of Tampa, I don't think they're going to have a problem getting 100 yards on New Orleans I mean, and Carolina's still developing. So it'll be really interesting to see. I mean, Davis has every opportunity to be a 1,100 yard rusher this year if he can monopolize on the opportunity. That's the big question, is we just haven't seen it at the NFL level. So with him being at his age and being in the league as long as he has, can he do it? Yeah. I think he can, because he hasn't done it. He hasn't had to.
Yeah, and that's a good point. That could be giving someone pause. It's just that I'm like, you look at his career stats, I'm like, he hasn't had a lot of touches. So he hasn't taken a lot of contact.
Right.
So I'm not overly worried about that. I'll say another thing too that people are underestimating is that I'm like, he's one of the rare backs that are out there that's he's very dynamic and can be productive as a runner, but also as a receiver, out of the backfield. Again, I'm gonna try to go off my memory here, so just been writing a lot of like player profiles and other things for a lot of these players for Pro Football Network. But I believe he ranked like in the top, I want to say the top 6 of targets among running backs like last year. And so he is lethal in, out in space. And so I think that's something that, Matt Ryan will end up leveraging a lot more. And the thing is, like with Matt Ryan at his age, I'm like, you don't want him back there throwing any more than what he needs to, like at this stage of his career. I'm like, and he's not a spring chicken, so to speak. So I think Davis will be a big part of that. But yeah.
Well, and with the offensive line ahead of him, I mean, you have to protect Matt Ryan because he can't run. Like, he's not getting away from anybody.
No, he's not.
And they don't have much behind Davis. I mean, Quadri Allison's not a guy that you can lean on. Deonta Foreman, although he was a fantasy darling as a high draft pick years ago, has never really bounced back from injury. And then I don't even know. I'd have to check.
They released him today as well.
Oh, Foreman was really about to say. I think Caleb Huntley was released too. So I was like, I don't know.
You're right.
What is Cordarrelle Patterson going to get in the running game? I mean, it's just
don't dismiss it.
I'm not dismissing it, but it's not scaring me away from Mike Davis. That makes me want Mike Davis more.
Right, and I was just going to say that I think sometimes you got to read the tea leaves, and the actions of an organization tell a pretty clear story. They drafted Javian Hawkins, released him. They brought in Deonta Foreman, released him. Huntley released. Todd Gurley had 17 carries inside the 5-yard line last year. So I know it's a different coaching staff, and I know it's a new regime, but that's opportunity. And you know what? Opportunity in a lot of situations trumps talent in fantasy football. You just need a chance. So I like Mike Davis. I think his career high in touches was last year in Carolina with 240-ish. Before that, it was in Seattle, where his last year in Seattle. He showed us flashes there. He definitely showed us flashes last year. I think to Eric's point, can he maintain it through the season? As I think it was week 3 where he got the starting role in Carolina, and he went bonkers for about 4 or 5 weeks, and he slowly started to tail off. So we'll see what happens. But I think there's a lot of weapons in that offense in Atlanta. I'm a huge Calvin Ridley guy. I kind of like Kyle Pitts a lot. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities. But that talent's going to help move the ball down the field, in my opinion. And I think Mike Davis has the ability to finish a lot of drives. So I think he's a really good, if you're a 0 RB fan drafter, he's one of those guys you should have on your radar to go with that drafting.
Yeah, especially if you can land him like in the 5th or 6th round, just depending on how his ADP fluctuates.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's a great buy at that price. I know, and this is why I really love having people like Eric on. The hour flies by quickly because we have great conversations, and the show is almost over. But Sullivan, I want to give you a chance. What did you see from the preseason? What was kind of your big takeaway outside of you gushing over the rookie quarterbacks and Kyle Pitts, obviously? What was exciting to you about this preseason, or did you learn something maybe you didn't think you knew, good or bad?
I don't know, Brad, to be honest. And Kyle Pitts did have a lovely catch that he turned into an extended 27-yard reception. So just remember that. Fortunately, that was his only target / catch in the preseason. No, I just think my biggest takeaway from it is, and I think it's going to be even more so next season, is why are you putting your guys out there? I think the thing that upset me the most about J.K. Dobbins being injured on Saturday was, why the hell was J.K. Dobbins playing on Saturday? What do the Ravens have to gain from him being on the field? Do they really want to win that 20th straight preseason game? Is that important to him? He's your number one running back. He's going to be your number one running back. No ifs, ands, or buts. And now you lost him for the season. For what? He doesn't need to be out there. And I think we learned a lot last year that we can still have an effective season without a preseason. And I think that's probably my biggest takeaway, is that we're going to see less and less quote unquote stars in the preseason because they just don't benefit. The risk doesn't, the risk is too high. There's not enough reward.
It makes me wonder if the league begins to, because we've already heard them say they want to get rid of preseason games and turn them into regular season games. It makes me wonder if they're going to keep using this to push that narrative. Like, hey, let's get rid of some of the preseason because you don't need it. But I really think the preseason can be very beneficial for a lot of these young guys and guys trying to make rosters. I mean, obviously Detroit didn't keep some of the darlings like Craig Reynolds and some of these guys that had big weeks, but these are at least give guys an opportunity to put on tape. Hey, like I can do something if you give me the opportunity. So I hope they don't get rid of the preseason because there is some benefit to it.
I don't think you can get rid of it in its entirety, but I do think you can go to 2 weeks. The Canadian Football League's had a 2-week preseason for the last 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't hate the idea. They'll want to turn that into another regular season game, so you'll get an extra regular season game, which I'm perfectly fine with.
Exactly.
But it then muddies the water because you have to be careful keeping your guys safe, especially all these running backs. So it is. And Rick's absolutely right. Eric, you are one of the best out there. We are definitely glad you hung out with us tonight.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that, Ricky.
It's definitely an interesting conversation to have moving forward. Like, what risk versus reward are you willing to do with some of your big name players, especially with the teams that it happened to? I mean, most of the teams that dealt with these injuries had playoff or Super Bowl aspirations. So it's like, do you really want to do that to your guys? I mean, I was surprised that Matthew Stafford made it to the preseason healthy because there was a few times I was like, ooh, that didn't look good. Or, ooh, be careful with him. He breaks easy. So that's it, people. We are done with the show. It's been fun talking about the preseason, but we're to the regular season. So with that being said, Roto Heat's regular season schedule kicks in. So starting next week, our Monday night IDP show that Craig and I do will be off for the season, but you can find Craig over with the Gridiron Ratings guys on Tuesday night doing some IDP if you want to jump over there and show some love. Tuesday night, I'll be doing the same thing with Mr. Sullivan, talking Dynasty, and then Wednesday night, I'll be doing Redraft with Bryce, who you guys may have remembered from last year if you were friends of the channel then. And then we've got a great DFS lineup coming. Rick's doing all sorts of amazing DFS stuff, which I will be watching on bated breath because I'm learning DFS, but not very good at DFS yet. So I'm excited about that. Hopefully you guys stick with us, like, subscribe to all the stuff we do. With that being said, Mr. Eric, tell everybody everything you got going on. The floor is yours, my friend. I do really appreciate you hanging out with us. You have been a joy to talk to, and you are the man, so the floor is yours.
No, appreciate that. Yeah, feeling is mutual. Hey, great show. Hey, thanks again for the invite. We'll have to do it again soon. But I say it feels good to say this, but you can find like all of my content, audio, written, video content over at Pro Football Network. Because I think the running joke before, because I was contributing and writing for so many places, it was like a laundry list. I'm like, you can just say the first two, that's fine. You don't have to say all of them. It's okay. But yeah, you can find all of my content there. But I know we still have some folks out there that are still preparing for drafts. I know it's been unique with how different the preseason is. So I would say if you are preparing for your draft, we've got a lot of fantasy football content over at our Pro Football Network. We've got player profiles for over 200 players. I know Tommy Garrett and myself have been working really hard this summer to put all these together, and so they've got projections that are built in, and just rationale behind why we like certain players or certain players that we don't like. We've got rankings as well. We got tiers. So pretty much anything that you would want, like in a fantasy football draft kit, we have there. But I would just encourage everyone that's watching, or listening, follow me on Twitter. Very active on the platform. You can find me at Eric N. Moody. Always love to answer questions and interact, with my followers. And I would just say some other things that I have planned. We got a podcast that we record each week. In the mood for fantasy football, so check that out. Listen to that. Leave a review, subscribe, of course. But also too, some other things that I have planned for with Twitter Spaces, just to get even more interaction, with other content creators out there, but also just fantasy football fans and managers. So always happy to help. So just reach out. Don't be shy. I'll circle back to you, and I'll close on this. It's funny. I've got 2 young kids. I watch a lot of kids movies, so they watch Richie Rich, the Macaulay Culkin classic, back in the early '90s. I think it's on Hulu if anyone even cares. But I'll close on this. Where Richie Rich said, hey, it's been great. It's been real. Until next time, gentlemen.
I love it.
Perfect. Awesome.
Make sure you go show some love because he does an amazing job, people. You will not regret it if you haven't yet. Checked it out. You better do so. Mr. Sullivan, preseason's over, brother. It's been a joy hanging out with you all preseason and all off season. We've been doing this for a while now.
We have.
Let's get our big boy pants on and get ready for the season. We love you guys. We'll see you next week.
Also, right there, playlist. Hit it. Watch the videos. Do it.